It has been such a great few months planning, filming, and working on this project for media studies. If you would have told me 8 months ago, which is the start of our school year, that I would end up becoming a filmmaker, screenplay writer, and director, I would have honestly laughed in your face. While I was always aware that media studies has a lot to do with film production before me becoming an A student, but I never expected to have to actually be this involved in it. But here I am, about to share with you my process of creating the opening scene for Reverie, and reflect on my skills throughout this entire journey. Reverie, the name of our opening scene, basically describes a state of being lost in one's own thoughts, or daydream. Pretty straightforward, right? The whole film strongly relates to this term, and if you watch the opening scene, you can clearly see how we try to portray this through the difference in colors between shots and also other technical tools. To give you a better idea of what the opening scene revolves around, Reverie is the story of a young teenager named Jules and her romantic obsession with August. This obsession is initially portrayed in the film as a pure relationship between two girls, but it continues into a downward spiral as the film progresses. Reverie itself is a psychological romance, so elements of mystery can definitely be expected throughout the opening scene. For the first 2 minutes specifically, we will be establishing a sense of unreliability that will gradually build up around Jules, the main character, by hinting at her inability to differentiate between reality and illusion. In order to communicate meaning through the scenes, we will have to take technical codes into consideration. This firstly consists of the use of sound, which is essential in setting the tone and reinforcing the genre of the film. We intend on using a high-pitched noise, almost resembling the heartbeat flatline sound at the beginning to catch the audience off guard and make them slightly disturbed as the camera focuses on the blood, arousing a sense of fear and repulsion. During the final scene, where the photo board is revealed, a music piece will be played hinting at the story behind Jules' dedication to collecting August's candid pictures is not based on a pure and innocent romantic connection, but perhaps obsession and possibly insanity. The camera work also contributes to defining the genre and conveying the messages behind each scene. The emphasis on intimate acts between the two main characters with close-ups of hand touches, emotions, and eye contact will display the romantic aspect of the genre. As for the psychological conflict that Jules experiences, the camera will mostly follow her, displaying what she is seeing and what's happening around her. There will be limited exposure to the actual world that the characters are living in, so the audience should be limited to what Jules is seeing and feeling, making her the narrator of the story. The use of lighting and color in the opening scene also helps reflect Jules' perception of reality. The subtle but crucial changes between colors in scenes where she's with August as opposed to when she's not is the key for the audience to eventually realize that Jules is mentally unstable, thus reinforcing the psychological genre. The scene also jumps between different locations and different moments in time, making it difficult for viewers to keep track of the flow of events. Jules, the main protagonist, is an unreliable narrator, yet the story is mainly told from her perspective. This throws the viewers off since they might be confused as to what they should believe and what they shouldn't. With the romantic aspect of the scene, we've included multiple intimate moments between the two characters, showing a close relationship. In fact, so perfect that it's just almost too good to be true. The common love triangle trope that was explored in so many romantic films is also a major plotline of our opening scene, but instead of the usual romantic relationship involving two main characters and a secondary character with two competing for the other's love, we challenge this convention by making one of our main characters mentally unstable. In this case, Jules considers her own relationship with August threatened by the appearance of a third person, when in truth, she's the real outsider. It's not a very proud thing to say that our representation of a homosexual female couple is probably a difference instead of a convention when it comes to the romantic genre, because it's something that should have been normalized and considered common in the film industry by now. Yet, since not everyone is comfortable with seeing the portrayal of homosexuality on screen, I suppose we are challenging the stereotype and stigma surrounding the LGBTQ+ community to include it in our opening scene. Additionally, we're narrating the story plainly by allowing viewers to see Jules' illusionary world while toying with the concept of time. This contributes to making our product a bit more original instead of predictable. When it comes to the matter of representation, it is worth mentioning that our product does not intentionally tackle an issue by casting performers of specific social groups. Our opening scene features two Vietnamese characters, but the only reason that there were only Asian performers in our product is that, well, we're in Vietnam. plot does not heavily depend on the ethnicity of the characters, so even if we were to cast performers of other races, it wouldn't change the meaning of the story. However, I'd argue that we're showing a different side to the lives of Asian teenagers, especially Vietnamese ones. It's not hard to find a film where Vietnamese teens are blatantly depicted as socially awkward or uncultured nerds. Most of the time, these characters only serve as comedic relief, hence there's no real effort to give them personality or even a background. The few exceptions to this are films or series released in recent years, where Vietnamese characters are not portrayed solely based on where they come from. Even so, it's still a pretty common notion that all teenagers' problems surround their overly strict parents, academic pressure, and poor social skills. Our production does not intentionally discuss the topic of cultural struggles. Instead, we encourage the viewers to perceive our characters as teenagers and teenagers only, regardless of their ethnicity. Not to ignore the very much prevalent problems that a lot of Vietnamese teenagers have with their culture, but we're trying to diversify their experience. We want them to come off as relatable and personality-driven characters, and once again reinforce that Vietnamese teens can be much more sophisticated than how they're currently being represented. Another social group that our characters represent is the members of the LGBT+ community. This is becoming more and more common in films and TV shows nowadays, but since the mass media is not entirely rid of the social stigma attached to homosexuality, we're still trying to raise the topic of discrimination and homophobia by including two girls who are involved in a romantic relationship. Our film is mainly targeted towards teens and adults who would enjoy a slow-paced, tender but at the same time intriguing and memorable cinematic piece. So our opening scene is set out to incorporate elements of romance for those seeking a sentimental yet gentle portrayal of teenage love, but also tension by exploring the psychology of the characters. While it does feature an affectionate connection between the two characters, it is far from a light-hearted romance. The mysterious, character-driven plotline, alongside an emphasis on internal conflict, is what we believe will be appealing to audiences that enjoy the psychological genre. I believe that not every opening scene needs to offer an attention-grabbing detail right away. They can be subtle and mellow as well. However, for low-budget productions like ours, it is better to ensure that we have viewers' attention and interest. Hessenhoff would argue that implementing strategies can help producers to maximize audience and minimize risk as much as possible. I can confidently say that our opening scene consists of factors that will make it potentially fitting for the mainstream audience. The first scenes that are shown can immediately grab their attention because of the dramatic and enigmatic elements, considering how we've made use of an intense and possibly disturbing sequence of visuals. The sudden switch to a different setting can intrigue some viewers as to what just happened, and whether they will find out why it did. The next scenes incorporate elements of the romantic genre, showing the two characters interacting and expressing affection. For those that seek a romantic storyline, this would probably satisfy them. For the last few shots, we circle back to the unanswered question raised at the beginning of the sequence, and give out hints as to whether Jules has committed a crime, and if she did, then why. The entire opening scene is filled with mystery, and I think it heavily contributes to making our product attractive to a large range of audience. And of course, our project will not actually be exhibited on any large platform and reach the targeted audience like we set out for. But if it was, I think it would be best if it was available to stream on sites like Netflix, Apple TV, Hulu, or perhaps Amazon Prime Video. This is partly because our production isn't exactly family-friendly, so there will be age restrictions if it ever got released in theater. The better option would be to release it on streaming platforms instead, because apparently it is now the viewing preference of young audiences. Viewers can also get access to our film for a longer period of time on streaming services than if it was released in the theater, which usually only lasts around 30 to 45 days. I'm the main screenwriter and co-director and producer alongside Bao Anh or Casey in this project. It was clear to me that I don't have the ability to act in front of the camera, so that was out of the picture from day one. However, I enjoyed constructing ideas for the opening scene and creating the script given the mutual consensus on my development of the story. During the pre-production process, I got to work on the screenplay and craft our first ideas, turning them into words. Then we worked as a group to create the storyboard to help us visualize the scenes and finalize our shot selections. When it was finally time to film, I was responsible for finding and purchasing some of the props, including the photo board and the fake blood, as well as asking to borrow the school's filming equipment. On the day of filming, Casey and I put together the board with the Polaroids that were taken on the photo shoot that we both worked on and organized her room so that it would look like Jules' room. Afterwards, I worked with her to help with editing since we both were in charge of working with the camera and filming. I also scout for sound drones, scores, and sound effects that will fit with our final production and the post-production process. Working on this opening scene was a great opportunity for me to learn the basics of film production because I had very little experience with it to begin with. I was honestly quite unsure of what to do when we started this process, but as it progresses, I began to communicate better with the members of my group and slowly adopted the skills that I lacked at the beginning of the process. Regarding my role as a screenwriter, I realized how things don't always follow the preset plan and that there might be changes that need to be made along the way for the final outcome to turn out as best as possible. We're very lucky to be equipped with various online, interactive platforms on the internet that can assist us with our final project. I can't imagine how we've done all the work that we did without integrating technology into our production. And honestly, I don't think the basic software that we used in our final production were video editing platforms and also cloud sharing services. Our teacher recommended that we use DaVinci Resolve, which is a free editing software that allows you to perform basic editing, color grading videos, and adjusting the sound of the video. I've never had to work with any editing software before, so we were fairly intimidated, considering DaVinci Resolve is quite challenging for beginners to use. Although Casey is the main editor of the project, I assisted her with some of the tools like layered audio editing or free transitions between the scenes. As for cloud sharing services, most of the footage that were filmed on the Canon camera that we borrowed from school were imported to Casey's device directly using a wireless network connection. However, when we shot the last few scenes using my camera, I had to upload videos onto Google Drive instead because the same feature wasn't working on mine. We also had to use some hardware devices, including the camera, videography equipment, laptop, and lights. As mentioned above, we made use of two cameras. Both were Canon with similar functions, and they had similar models. We borrowed a tripod and a microphone from school. The tripod helped us to keep the camera stationary for shots that required a pan movement. The microphone was useful for recording sounds and making sure that the dialogue can be heard clearly. I had to use my laptop to write the screenplay, research, and upload videos onto a shared drive, while Casey used her laptop to edit the video using DaVinci Resolve. The first and final scene of our opening sequence relied on artificial light. The first scene used low-key lighting, so we only had to turn on one softly lit light in the kitchen to achieve the final look. The last scene was more high-key lighted, and we had to avoid using natural lighting to prevent it from reflecting off the Polaroid pictures. YouTube was a great source, especially when I had to look up soundtracks to art to a video. Multiple audio materials were taken from YouTube, such as the sounds of blood, dripping, or the scores that were used. And also Spotify. This is where I got most of the sound drones that were used in our final video. I found many playlists that consist of drones of different moods and tones, which was really helpful. For Google, I did most of my research using this as a search engine, although not all information gathered from the articles and websites I read were usable. They provided me with knowledge on the process of creating media products. And we also made use of Pinterest to create our mood board using photos from this platform. We were able to put together an idea of what we wanted our video to look like, and using Pinterest, we could insert our own version of cinematic visuals of the opening scene into a shared board. Overall, I am quite proud of the progress that we've made in this subject, and particularly for this project. The many challenges and struggles that I personally and my group had to deal with helped me understand the level of hard work and dedication that it takes to create a media text. Any media text, not just films or TV shows. I've developed skills that I otherwise would have lacked if it wasn't for learning about the creative process behind an opening scene. And I would love to be able to put these skills into practice in future projects.